Hey everyone, Bond here from Dr. Pennsylvania. Today we have past periodical number 19. This one comes from the Pittsburgh Press, July 16th, 1907. So for this one, you guys will need a little context. The readers of this article at the time would be familiar with the case of the Biddle Brothers from 1901, who were kind of a big deal in the Allegheny and Butler County areas. They were the leaders of what was called the chloroform gang. They basically would chloroform people and rob them. They were eventually caught during the murder of a grocer up on Mount Washington, and there was also a police officer killed in the process. They were standing trial for these murders, and they were actually helped to escape by the warden's wife at the time, Kate Sofel. Then what ended up happening was Jack and Ed Biddle were involved in a shootout / suicide. Even at the time, there was a lot of confusion over what happened, like who shot who, but either way, Jack and Ed Biddle died from their wounds. So this article, written a few years later, is titled "Friends of Prisoners Serving Life Sentence in Biddle Case Become Active."
Friends of prisoners serving a life sentence in Biddle case become active. May present the case soon. Friends of Walter Dorman, alias Robert Wilcox, now serving a life sentence for the murder of grocer William Cohn at Mount Washington on the morning of April 12, 1901, will ask the State Board of Pardons for a pardon for the man, the movement having been started several weeks ago. This is another chapter in the sensational and notorious Biddle case, the latest chapter of which was the tragic death of the Biddle brothers at the hands of officers when the murderers made their escape from Allegheny County Jail in the winter of 1902-1903. Dorman, whose real name is Robert Wilcox and whose family is a prominent one of Cleveland, Ohio, has served 5 years of his life sentence for the part in the death of the Mount Washington grocer. And because of his good conduct and the fact that Jack Biddle was the one who actually killed Miss Cohn, friends of the prisoner believed he should be freed, and the effort will be made to that end. Dorman has been an exemplary prisoner according to prison officials, and while they have received no official notice of a pardon will be applied for, they say they are aware that such action had been started. Worries about a woman. At the time Dorman was arrested, a woman giving the name of Jenny Wilcox was also arrested. She was given a light sentence along with Jessie Wright, Ed Biddle's common-law wife. Since his confinement, Dorman, whose real name is the same as that given by the woman, but is of no relation, has been worrying about her, and he has made every effort to keep track of the girl. He received some information some time since that she has married a man in Ohio, and is said the news nearly drove him insane. Later she had word that she was in New York State and that the Ohio wedding story was incorrect. He expressed a wish to friends to visit him at the prison that he may get out and marry the girl. His whole ambition, it is said, is to secure a pardon and then search for Miss Wilcox and marry her, according to the city detective who talked to him recently in the prison. The fighting over the separation of the girl, and is doing all in his power to get trace of her and get in communication with the woman he loves. Preparing evidence. His family and their legal advisors in Cleveland are back of the movement to get him pardoned, and are preparing the necessary evidence for the presentation to the pardon board within several months. The record of the trial will be used in the connection to show that while Dorman was with the Biddles, he actually did not fire a shot in the depredations, and that Jack and Ed Biddle were the ones who were ready to and did use revolvers on the grocer and the police. Dorman's brother, James Wilcox, is the man in charge of the work of securing evidence on which to base the pardon. The story of the crime is one of the worst in the history of Allegheny County, and came as a climax of a series of robberies and depredations that kept the police of Pittsburgh and the surrounding towns on the jump for months before they succeeded in landing the perpetrators, and then only at the loss of a life of one of the best officers the city ever had, Detective Patty Fitzgerald. Robberies frequent. During the months preceding the murder of Grocer Cohn, reports of robberies and burglaries were of almost daily occurrence, and the wide latitude of the work made it hard to connect them to any one gang. An East End robbery and a subsequent rushing of the police to the scene would be followed the next night by one in Allegheny, and the next night by one in the South Side, and then probably Millville or Wilkinsburg. Superintendent of Police Roger O'Mara kept his men on the jump in trying to land the thieves, but without success, until the murder of Cohn, when a chance remark by a woman who worked with Walter Dorman, roomed, and who now lives in East Liverpool, Ohio, led to the arrest of the trio and the killing of Detective Fitzgerald. Dorman, for whom his friends will apply a pardon, turned the state's evidence and told the story of the crime on the witness stand after pleading guilty to murder in the first degree and being sentenced to be hanged. The sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment. According to Dorman's story, the trio had perpetrated all the robberies that had kept the police so active, and had robbed places that had not been reported or considered the work of the same gang. The killing of Cohn and the subsequent events formed a graphic story and was told subsequently as follows. Story of the crime. The day before the murder of the three men, Ed and Jack Biddle and Walter Dorman left their rooms on Bedford and Fulton Street and went to Mount Washington to pick a place to rob that night. They finally found the Cohn store. Dorman went into the place and represented himself as an agent for a city directory. He asked Cohn how many there were in the family, and he was told 3, Mr. and Mrs. Cohn and their 12-year-old son. They left and came back to the city in the evening and started for the hilltop and went to a vacant lot back of the store where they watched until 2 o'clock the next morning. Then they climbed on a fence near the kitchen window and forced an entrance through it. They sat on the floor for a quarter of an hour to be let suspicious that might have been aroused by their entrance, and then they went to the bedroom where Cohn and his wife usually slept. That night, however, Cohn was sleeping in another room and the son was with Mrs. Cohn because of a slight illness. The trio entered the room, Dorman having a handkerchief saturated with chloroform to put the couple to sleep. Their entrance awakened Miss Cohn, but she was prevented from making an outcry by the 3 men, and the son was similarly silenced by threats of death. Mrs. Cohn, however, struggled with Dorman, who was trying to apply the chloroform, and this noise awakened Cohn, who thought their son was worse. He got up and entered the room, took in the situation at a glance, but before he had any opportunity to resist, Jack Biddle shot him dead, the body falling partially across the bed. The 3 men then hurried from the house and ran out into the country, where they made inquiry at a coal bank where they could find a car to Carnegie. They reached the car line and came home, going to their rooms, Dorman on Bedford Street and the 2 Biddles on Fulton Street. The police were stirred to renew activity over the murder and Dorman's boarding mistress, who lived such a queer life, and the sister turned him in. He informed the police and Detective Fitzgerald was sent to investigate. Dorman's arrest followed, when he tried to get his revolvers to shoot the officer. The woman giving the name of Jenny Wilcox was taken into custody at the same time because she tried to hide some stolen property. The Biddles were next traced because of their visiting Dorman, and then came the fight in which Ed Biddle killed Detective Fitzgerald in the former's room as the latter attempted to arrest the burglar. The trial of the trio was one of the most sensational ever held in Allegheny County, and had it not been for Dorman's confession made at the instance of his brother, who had a long talk with him, then District Attorney John C. Haymaker, it would have been impossible to convict the men, but Dorman's story made everything plain. The escape from jail of the Biddles and their pursuit and death on the road between Pittsburgh and Butler are of too recent occurrence to need repetition. Dorman had in the meantime been reprieved, and the pardon board asked to commute his sentence to life imprisonment. District Attorney Haymaker joining the petition. This was done, and he was taken to Riverside Penitentiary to serve the remainder of his natural life.